Hey, Talia here, and today on I Got Back Up, I'm joined by Troy Noak. Formerly a jiu-jitsu competitor, Troy's road back to the mats has been anything but straightforward. In preparation for competition, he fractured his patella, but it was what came after that truly tested him. Eager to return, Troy pushed too hard, too soon, and ruptured his hamstring. A physical recovery and an even longer mental battle lay ahead that proved more challenging than the injury itself. Facing himself, Troy shows just how your life can change when you show up to your fears. So, Troy, when you hear the phrase, I got back up, how does it make you think and feel?
The first thing I associate with that is definitely resiliency,
Mm.
especially with myself. I overcame a couple injuries that were parlayed together while I was getting ready for a jiu-jitsu competition, which massively set me back. And as a taller guy, lower body injuries are very common. With me, I shattered my knee. And then right after that, I followed that up with rupturing my hamstring. So I was virtually not very mobile for over a year.
Mm.
And similarly, when it comes to having a bad injury physically, that can also permeate into your actual mentality and carry over into other parts of life. So that is one thing that's definitely hard to overcome when it comes to an injury like that.
No, absolutely. And we're going to get into that, especially the mental side of things, because physical injuries don't just come alone. They come hand in hand with the mental side of things pretty much all the time. But it's a really key point you mentioned is resilience. And every human being has resilience. But it's a sad thing to say that sometimes we only find it when we're forced to find it.
I mean, I can totally resonate with that. And this is the thing with me overcoming this injury is it has taken a very long time, and the mental side actually took longer than the literal physical side. So for me, like when I first broke my knee, when I started physical therapy, in my opinion, the physical therapy was to operate at a normal person level, not competing in any athletics or anything. Hence why this hamstring injury followed by very quick after. And in retrospect, my posture was off. So obviously, to compensate for my shattered knee, I was leaning on one side of my body more than the other. So as soon as I came back, after I was deemed clear, which I probably wasn't, I was doing this thing where we would take a soccer ball, punt it across the field, and basically yell like easy, medium, or hard, which would indicate how hard you sprint after it. Come back, do 20 push ups, do the same thing over and over again until you do 120. And then in the middle of that, it literally felt like I got stabbed with a knife right in my leg. And I went down. I heard something as well. Obviously, I knew something was catastrophically wrong as like my calf is touching my butt. And I was like, this is not very good. I'm seeing blotches of color. And I'm just like, this is really bad. And yeah, it was a terrifying thing. And like I said before, it's a very long process to overcome that.
And I want to get into obviously what happened originally with the knee. But I've got to say, respect to 120 press ups because I mean, I probably could if I had to, but I wouldn't choose to.
Oh no, that's just the one thing about having good people to train with and training partners is they can help you persevere through that. Because obviously, doing 120 on my own is much harder to do than if someone's there pushing you.
And you know what? That's why I said I probably could do it because I was about to say I wouldn't do it, but then something inside of my brain went, yeah, but if I was challenged, believe me, I would do 120 press ups no matter how long it took me. But that's an interesting point on mindset as well, is the strength that we all have in our own minds, which we can build and we can continuously build over time. But the strength that we actually do have inside of us, when even I just now went to say I can't do something, and then I stopped myself and thought to myself, well, I actually probably could if I was tried or challenged. But there's that as well. It's the can and the can't mindset. But before we go into all of this, I want you to then take us back to the beginning of what happened with your knee.
Okay, so this is before I was going to school. I had taken a break from going to college. At this time, all that I was thinking about was getting into competition shape to do jujitsu. Because before this, I have proficiency in striking. So in my head, I was like, okay, if I could round out my skill set and actually get some sort of grappling acumen, maybe something can come of that. I was younger than I am now. I'm currently 28 years old. So a few years back, maybe I was like 24. There was a little bit more jump in my step when it was coming to being motivated to that. So When I started jujitsu, I was in decent shape, but not in very good shape, meaning I wasn't going and weight training very seriously. I was just showing up and getting the shit beaten out of me over and over again. So I was going for about, before I injured myself, I would say about a year and change. And this is when I started to ramp up my workload. So essentially, what our schedule would be like 4 days a week. You would start doing instructionals and learning new techniques, probably in like the first 20 minutes. Then you would go live, which is basically 80 to 100%, where you're going after each other, starting in disadvantageous positions, and then follow that up with an open mat of an hour. And you're basically dying. And after I did that for about a year, I was like, okay, on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, since I'm not going to school, I'm going to go to the wrestling focused class to really level up. Because when these jujitsu classes are packed, you can't start on the feet because there's too many people in there and people's heads would be hitting each other's knees. So obviously on a Tuesday or Thursday afternoon, there's not a million people. They could run a wrestling class. I go into the wrestling class and I'm on the ground and I'm trying to resist a single leg takedown and something goes off in my knee and it was a very sharp pain and I stood up and it was strange because your knee isn't a weight bearing bone. So unless it's shattered into a million pieces, you can actually walk around. So when my knee was on the ground resisting the takedown, it felt severe pain. So I got up, I was like, hold on, like I need to stop. I'm walking around. I'm like, reset. I calm down about like 15 seconds. Okay, I think I'm good. We could go back and go live. I get someone gets double underhooks on me, which basically means they're bear hugging me. I have one knee on the ground and I get tilted over so easily yet again, where I'm like, okay, something is definitely wrong. I tell my coach, I'm like, something's wrong with my knee. I'm not really sure what it is. It's not swelling, it's not doing anything immediately, but I know every time it touches the ground, it's severe pain, but I can walk. So my coach is like tapping on my knee. I'm just like, it's a little discomfort, but it's not like when my knee goes down. And then both my parents are MRI tech, so coincidentally, like I was able to get scanned relatively quickly. And yeah, they put me under there and they're like, yeah, you've got a fracture right across the front of your kneecap. Like you're not going to be able to compete or even grapple anytime soon. And the worst possible thing you could do is obviously putting your knee straight on the ground. So I had to take a ton of time off from that. I think the recovery period was about 3 months once I finished physical therapy.
Did you have any operations for that or not?
No, luckily not. But I think, like I had mentioned before, the physical therapy, I don't know how it is in your country compared to mine, where it's like you go, you get an MRI scan, they tell you your diagnosis, you get prescribed physical therapy, and a certain amount of it's covered by insurance.
Mm.
After the prescription runs out, you basically burn a hole in your pocket going to physical therapy. So after I completed my 3 months of doing it covered through insurance, I was like, okay, like I'll go back, get in shape, do whatever. I'm allegedly cleared.
And looking back now, obviously, you've touched upon what happens next. Do you think you should have been cleared?
I think if I wasn't actually going to compete in any sort of athletics and I was just going to walk around and drive and go to work, I think I should have been cleared. But I'm not sure that I was on the same page with my physical therapist in that aspect where I was trying to take it up a notch. Like I probably should have been doing 100 pistol squats before I was able to leave that place.
It's an interesting point to note, actually, because I remember in my physio, and I was obviously cleared, but I remember when I was in physio, I went back into the gym. This was after my ACL surgery, so after my second knee operation. And we were doing, I can't remember exactly the weight now, but I was doing squats. And what for me now was also a very easy weight. And it was all I was allowed to do. And it got to the point where mentally I was like, this is getting boring now. Like I definitely can go heavier. And I remember speaking to my physio about it, and he said, absolutely not. He said, there is no way you are ready physically. Your mind might be, but physically, you are not ready to start doing heavier squats. And I was like, but why? And he obviously explained, he said to me, just because you want something short term and you want it so bad right now, he said, you are basically going to jeopardize long term if you kind of grab it too hard and you force it right now to happen. He was like, you're not ready for it to happen right now. You have to think about the long term. And that was a really interesting thing and a point to make because it's something I've also taken into so many different aspects of my life. But again, mentally, whether it's physically in recovery or rehab or even just mentally in general, even if you want something right now, and I'm a very impatient person, but if you want something right now, it may not be right just this moment. You might have to wait a little bit longer for it to, for the longevity for it.
And that was one thing that I definitely struggled with because, like I said before, when you're gearing close to competition shape, you feel like you're operating like you're close to being in a competition. And obviously, that mentality permeates through.
Mm.
And once I was on the shelf for 3 months, and naturally, like lack of mobility, just gaining weight from being immobile, you're like, I can't get too far off of competition shape or I'm screwed. So that was the thing in the back of my head that pushed me past that. Hence why I got injured the next time with my hamstring, which was the worst injury that I've ever had in my life.
So what happened with that then?
Yeah, like I had mentioned before, I was doing sprints superset with push-ups at the soccer field near my house, and my posture wasn't corrected after physical therapy from breaking my knee, and I was leaning on one side more than the other. Conducting the sprint, I hear a pop. I feel like I got stabbed with a knife. I'm going down. I'm trying to gain my composure. And the worst part is this is the leg that I have to press the gas pedal with to get home. And like, there's no option that I was actually taking an ambulance because I was just like, I'm gonna have to drive home and this is gonna hurt so bad. So after I got the MRI, essentially how they described it to me was like the fringe of grade 2 pushing on grade 3. Like surgery was on the table, and the description they gave of it is like basically imagine like old underwear when like the waistband isn't perfect and it starts turning into like a ribbon.
Hmm.
It was scrunched up like that, but like a garlic knot, basically up near my butt for like about 3.5 inches worth of hamstring was shriveled up. And I'm not joking. Sitting wasn't comfortable. Obviously, walking wasn't comfortable. Stretching wasn't an option. And obviously, I couldn't run. And when sitting isn't comfortable, it's really hard to get quality sleep and relax. And obviously, that perfectly correlates with poor mental health because you really need to sleep and rest. And when you can't just like decompress and reset, you're always on edge and it makes everything worse.
So was your hamstring literally hanging on by fibers?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've
Like the
never I've
term
actually
rupture. Yeah.
I've heard a lot, but I've never, and I envisioned it all in my mind. I've never heard that one before.
Yeah. And they, like I said, both my parents are MRI techs. So the person scanning me was my own mother. So, like, obviously, she's has the ability to tell me
Mhm.
what it is, although she's not a technical radiologist and her job is literally to scan me and not to tell me what it is. I came out of the machine like 3 days before the diagnosis. She's like, there's a pretty good chance you need surgery. And if you don't, the physical therapy route is going to be massive. And on top of that, like what you did last time, which is the reason why you're injured, you're not taking it quick. And that is the thing that was really tough for me this time around because I was like, 3 months felt like an eternity before, and the recovery of this is going to be basically 3 to 4 times as much, and it's going to be horrible. And mentally, that put me in such a dark place just because I was fresh off an injury. I basically injured myself within 3 weeks of coming out of physical therapy and recovering from my knee. So I was right back into it.
Exactly. You go back in, you feel fresh, you feel ready, you're excited, you feel strong. You're like, come on, I've got this. And then the worst thing and your biggest fear then happens, but to an extremity. What what was your recovery then? And did you have surgery?
So I didn't have surgery and I had the longest physical therapy ever. And I know you're a soccer or a football fan, so you'll probably be able to remember this clip in some capacity from social media. But if you've seen those videos of Neymar getting a massage, like recovering his injury, basically screaming and crying, that was me inside physical therapy. Like they would put like the jelly on my leg, put the stim on to basically like relax my muscles as much as possible. And then basically, like someone would come in there and basically drive their fist into like the back of my hamstring. And it hurt so bad, it wasn't even funny. And like the other thing that was really like tough is similar to a Pilates workout. If you have both your feet on the floor and your shoulder blades touching the ground, just simply raising your butt off the ground 6 inches was so difficult because A, like you don't have the center of gravity, and two, like every movement you make beyond resting position, it feels like the hamstring is still holding on by a thread. Like it felt that way for like 6 months. The muscles around it were so weak for like 2 to 3 years, but I actually felt like it was holding on by a fiber for about 6 months.
Well, that's the thing. All the other muscles and things like that compensate around the injury. So
Yeah,
physically, how are you doing now?
much better. But like I had mentioned, the mental side of it was exponentially harder to come over because once once I broke my knee and ruptured my hamstring, as I had mentioned before, like combat sports, jiu-jitsu, that was the only thing on my mind. I wasn't going to school. Once I was injured again, I was like, you know what? Let me go back to school since I can barely move. But even like I had mentioned before, like simple things like sitting in class or driving to school weren't that easy. Whereas like that's a pretty routine thing for everyone.
Mhm.
Like a lot of people could just take that for granted of like, I'm just gonna hop in my car and I'll be at school in 15 minutes and I'll sit there and like I'm gonna retain information. Whereas like I'm sitting there and it's hard for me to focus because I can't even sit comfortably. And that also massively negatively affected my performance in school. Like for basically my entire life, barring this stint where I had the injury, I've had great grades. And my personal threshold to pass, although passing in school terms and like what you believe is good is totally different, I dropped the bar so much because just simply doing schoolwork was so hard for me because my emotional bandwidth was destroyed because of my physical condition.
So what were the things that were going through your mind at the time?
And this is the thing, like it actually totally defeated me in the sense of like, although I was still passing my classes, I completed a semester and I was like, this is too much on me. And I wasn't taking a lot of classes. I was taking 12 credits. And I was like, I actually have to take a break because sitting in class and like waiting 15 minutes and going to the next class and sitting around is actually horrible for me. Like I would have to sit around with pillows under my knees, like in a certain position. So if my legs were too straight at any time, it would hurt. If they were in a 90-degree angle for too long, it was totally hurt. And I had to stop going to school because it totally affected my performance. Like I said, I was passing the classes, but
Mm.
to my standards previously, it just wasn't good enough. I had taken time off of school. Once I had come back and recovered from the injury, there was a direct correlation of since A, I wasn't suffering physically and mentally, my grades were able to go right back up. I graduated from my local community college. I'm sure you have those over here, like a 2 year school.
Mm.
I graduated from my community college. My grades went up as soon as I came back near a 4.0. I graduated last spring, so about a year ago, and I got into New York University, NYU, which is one of the best schools in the country. I don't know if you know that because you're from England, but that it the results show for themselves. Like if I could barely scrape by and pass a class in community college where the quality of education is drastically lower, and I'm now currently taking classes and have already gotten two A's and classes that finish in 7 week condensed sessions. Like it just shows you how important being resilient is and not giving up on yourself.
And you hit the nail on the head there, absolutely. Resilience, you started it off at the very beginning. Resilience is the key here. And, first of all, congratulations for getting into NYU.
Thank you.
And I do know what that is. And that's amazing. So congratulations. But you said it, despite everything you've been through physically and mentally, even dropping out of school, you've still been able to achieve. I mean, you've been able to achieve the most amazing things and a dream come true. And it is definitely the key word here is resilience because we all go through moments and dark times where we absolutely want to give up. We absolutely want to give up for whatever it might be that we're going through. But you have to, even if it's the tiniest slither of hope or a tiny flicker of flame, you almost hold on to anything that will just keep you going. Um, but I think people really underestimate injuries and the severity of what it can do and how it can impact you mentally. Because, especially if you've been through a serious one before and you've been through surgeries or long rehabs and it's taken you out of sport or whatever it is, your life, that whatever it is it might be, and you get it re injured again or injured in a very different capacity, people underestimate how that can then physically affect you because you know what you've been through once before. You don't want to go through it again. And if you have to go through even something not as extreme or something smaller, it's still going to affect you mentally.
Yeah, and the other thing is when you're down mentally and your emotional bandwidth is massively compromised, it is hard to find motivation from within. And this is the part that I definitely left out as a guy. I feel like it's easy for me to find external motivation, whether it is good or bad. So for me, for instance, about a year ago, my grandpa was diagnosed with lung cancer. And that was one thing that externally motivated me, A, to try really hard in school, and B, make him happy, right? And then another thing was, I don't know if you watch the UFC, but there's a fighter named Charles Oliveira. He used to be the champion. And essentially, there is a concept or a theory in combat sports where heart cannot be taught. You either have it or you don't. And this is a fighter that came into the UFC as a highly touted prospect, a jiu-jitsu expert at the 145-pound weight class, and constantly would get finished by technical knockout. He wouldn't get knocked out cold. He'd crumple up into a ball and quit. And he would be labeled as a quitter and a loser. And over time, A, he went up in weight class. So obviously his physical health improved in terms of his durability. But he was also able to make a turn mentally that he was not going to close the door and quit on himself. And that is an athlete that has provided so much inspiration for me because this is a guy that was on the verge of getting cut from the UFC, won 10 fights in a row, and became the champion. And then in high fashion, finishing everyone. It's not like he was just getting 30-27 decisions. Like, this is a very miraculous and unique thing. And I think finding external motivation is very important too, because when you're down bad, like I mentioned before, it is hard to convince yourself that you're backing your own intuition because you're hesitant. Like, when you're not feeling like yourself and you're not optimized physically and mentally, you're reluctant to do what you initially think. And then paralysis by analysis, time passes you by, and you get stuck a little bit sometimes.
Yeah, there's a lot to think about in what you just said. You're right. And when we are in those lower moments, we doubt ourselves. We doubt the amazing, unique, wonderful human beings that we are with all these talents that we have. We doubt ourselves. And the more we doubt, the more we get stuck, and the more everyone else might be moving forward in their lives in very different capacities, in very different ways. But you're right, we get stuck.
And then another thing is a pat on the back can really go a long way. Some positive reinforcement. Like, don't get me wrong, I like competing in sports. I don't mind a coach that holds you accountable and he yells at you. I can respond well to that. Not everyone does, right? But sometimes someone just saying, like, hey, like, this is a skill set that you have, and they make you know your role and you feel valued, it can massively change how you feel about yourself. Like, for instance, my boss, Martin, from Sleeper, when I was going through this tough time, my grandpa's still recovering from this. So when I was going back to school and all this tough stuff was happening to me, I was thinking, I really want to work in sports so bad. Sleeper, it's a fantasy sports app in America, super popular. Obviously, it's on its way up in the UK. But I had set a hard deadline on myself that at the year that 2025 started, if I did not have any job for free or paid in sports, I would accept that, move on, and never have a job in sports again and move on elsewhere. And luckily, Martin, our boss, gave me an opportunity from doing shows about hockey on YouTube, not backed in the Premier League soccer. Obviously, I'm a huge fan and I'm very knowledgeable of that, but he gave me a chance. And you know what? That is what I needed at the time more than anything because all of our coworkers, you know them, you've met them before. They're established content creators. Like, these guys have tens of thousands of followers. And like, for me to come in with no self platform that I've monetized by myself and just guest appearances, I was really motivated to really try to prove myself. and hold my weight against these guys. Obviously, I'm not directly competing against them, but to know like I'm starting with an account with 000 followers, and these guys are popping on with thousands of them, and they can manufacture fantastic engagement. Like I have to try 5 times harder to punch above my weight to hang with these guys, you know? And that's what I needed at the time so bad. Like I was dreaming for this job in sports, and luckily I got this opportunity.
And it's the emphasis on try because how I see it is someone else in the world has done that thing that you want to do. So why can't you? And it doesn't mean anyone else, whatever age they are, whether they're younger or older, is ahead of you. It's not about competition. It's not about being ahead of someone, behind somebody, because we're all moving at our own pace, on our own timeline. And the things happen to us when they're meant to happen to us. You know, they'll never happen too soon. And that's one thing that's really important to know is they never happen too soon. Whatever it is, it doesn't happen too soon. And I think we alluded to that earlier. You never get anything before it's the right time. And that comes in with, like we were saying, impatience, whatever it might be. But you have to try in life. You have to try. And just because something might not be working one way or 100 different ways, don't give up because that 101 way could be the game changer that just changes everything in your life.
Yeah, and it's very interesting, like, especially from my life, the mentality of being able to persevere and push through things was very prevalent and apparent to me whilst I was inside the gym training for combat sports. But once I stepped outside, I mean, malleable is a great word, soft is another one. But over time, like, you develop personal skills, whether you're traveling, you
Mm.
get beat up enough times at the gym that you realize that's definitely worse than stuff that happens to you outside of the gym. And it's just like, you definitely are very much shaped by your own experiences. And if you're too hard on yourself, as we're talking about getting back up, like there's a time like when I was injured so bad that I didn't even know if I was going to ever lift weights again. You know, like I was just like, you know what? I would rather not get hurt and just stay like here. Like 1 year ago, I weighed 45 pounds more than I do right now, which is absolutely insane to think about. Like, if you look at the first video that I made for our job at Sleeper, I look unrecognizable to what I look like right now.
So then I have a question for you. Do you think we are our own worst enemy? Do we self-sabotage things? Do we stand in the way of ourselves?
100%.
Mm.
I mean, like I said before, what has pushed me to this point over the past year was 100% external motivation, not internal. Because, like I'd mentioned before, when it comes to being compromised, being fragile, and low in emotional bandwidth, you are not reacting off your first instinct. You are always hesitating.
And we're doing that through our emotions, aren't we? Rather than feeling, what's it, safe, secure, excited, whatever it might be, we are too in our own heads. We're too worried about something. We're just too worried about anything else that we don't end up responding in the ways that we want to.
Yeah, and I always like making analogies to sports because it's very easy for people to understand. So imagine that you're playing forward for your soccer team and you miss a tap in from 5 feet away. Everyone in the back of their head knows that they're like, how did this guy miss this? But no one's going to come up to you and say it to your face.
Yeah.
But if you miss a second one in a row, inherently you're probably going to stop shooting as much because your confidence is so low.
Hmm.
And that's the point that I'm trying to make, where it's like you are your own worst enemy in certain ways. Whereas some people, they're just have the mental fortitude up to a different level where if they miss two sitters like that, I'm going to shout out my guy, Erling Holland, right here. He's going to keep taking 5 shot attempts a game. It doesn't matter if he misses, he's going to get after it. And if he misses horribly and there are penalty shots, it's fine. But like me in my instance with the injury, I missed 2 tap-ins and then it just had me frozen. And then I had to unwrinkle out the negative mindset that I had, where I could basically just respond as things came in and not hesitate, which took more time than actually recovering from the injury physically.
And that's an extremely hard process that a lot of people we as human beings, we don't want to go through that process of unraveling whatever it is inside of us, whether it's physically, mentally, emotionally. We don't want to unravel it. And we know what we have to do. Or sometimes we don't even know what we have to do, but to unravel what is going on is extremely hard. But once we start to do it, we see life in a way that is so much more beautiful than we've ever seen it before. And we get through these darknesses, these demons, these negative thoughts that consume us and control us. But when we can see through the other side, we get those glimmer of lights, those glimmer of hope, and we start to see who we really are, and we learn about ourselves in so many different ways. There is so much beauty in the other side and in living and in life that we lose sight of and we lose track of a lot of the time.
Yeah, I totally agree with you in that aspect. And like I said before, everyone, for the most part, is family oriented and values their family members. But with my personal situation with my grandpa, like once you find out someone has lung cancer and they're getting a piece of their lungs taken out, it almost feels like someone's operating on borrowed time. And I almost felt like I had to speed run things. Like I had mentioned before, like I wanted to make him happy. I wanted to finish up school. And that was one thing where, and I started going back to school. I tried really hard. A few months later, I get this job with Sleeper. A few months later, I'm like, okay, I've been in the gym for this long. I've had a drastic physical change. And I'm like, how did I do this in 4 months? You know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
I was, for lack of a better term, stuck in the mud for like 3 years. And in 4 months, I've had like a double XP token on my character development because of external motivation. And then I said, I could basically be operating at this level the entire time. And then I started to back my internal motivation. So like there's some things that I really don't like doing and I'll push through it. Whereas before, like the thought of persevering or trying something new, I just be like, I'm not risking myself getting injured or like wanting to compromise my emotional bandwidth. I'm already easily irritable.
But again, that all of it explains being in your own way. Obviously, you had the external motivation to kickstart you, but once you weren't in your own way anymore and you started to do things to prove to yourself and to whoever else that is that you wanted to prove, like you said, it for 3 years you were stuck in the mud, and all of a sudden in 4 months everything changed. And I think that's incredibly motivating for anybody that's listening, because we've all been stuck in the mud so many times, and sometimes for a very, very long time, and we think that things are never, ever, 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 ever going to change, but they can and they will. And I think that's the important thing, is they can. You just have to find your own ways, your own motivation, your own resilience to make them change. And I think we said it before, if they may listen to how it changed for you, how it changed for me, how it changed for somebody else, give it a go. Doesn't work, but that doesn't mean give up. That just means that's not your way. Find your own groove, find your own way, because there's a different way for everybody, and everything can change in the blink of an eye.
And I think having a different way and a different path is very important. And that is one thing that definitely held me back, especially on the school side. Whereas over here, the majority of people, they go through college, they're done by 21, they have a job probably in a major that they're not super sold on, and they got the piece of paper they're going through. And one of the things that really was like intimidating for me, A, I was out of shape because I was injured so much and I was 45 pounds heavier than I am now. And B, I'm older than a traditional college student. So the thought of me going back as a complete unk was very intimidating to me. I was like, I might be in a class with 18-year-old kids that can't even grow a mustache. And I was like, this is embarrassing. Like, and that was a huge mental obstacle for me. Like, I am making light of the situation, but the truth is, like, when I first went back to school after all that time, that was one of the things that was like really, really intimidating to me. And then the first class I go into, which thank God this was the way that the class was set up, had a 55-year-old guy sitting in the front row right next to me, another middle-aged lady in the front row, 2 rows over, a handful of people my age, a bunch of 18-year-old kids. And I was like, okay, there is exponentially less pressure on me here. I just have to perform. Like my biggest fear stepping into that classroom was already gone in 30 seconds. And I just was like, I have to apply myself and pull through here.
But can you imagine if that greatest fear was the reason you never ended up going?
And that is crazy. Like, as you said, like, that was the most intimidating thing to me of being like, oh, like, I'm older than a traditional college student. Whereas, like, now I'm back in NYU. It's the same exact situation. Obviously, there's not as many people of a diverse class as I had in community college in terms of age. But it's the same exact thing. And I walk into class on the first day. It's like, this is nothing that I should be worried about. I don't even know I was in my head about this for so long.
And that's the beauty of one of my favorite phrases, which is, well, not happens, it's not about what if it all goes wrong. It's about what happens if it all goes right. Like, what happens if it all goes right? We're so scared all the time. And I can hold myself accountable for this, don't get me wrong. But we are also scared about what if it all goes wrong. We make our biggest fears into these huge, big monsters that we are terrified of. But what happens if it all goes right? What happens if those fears that we're scared of don't even end up happening? Or, not only do they not end up happening, like they are just completely rubbish. Like there's nothing truth in any of them. And what happens if we step into that fear and our wildest dreams come true? Like, and that's what we have to think about. Like, maybe there was a point you never thought that you might actually be not the oldest person in the room when you walked in there. And you were too worried about being the oldest person. And you walk in and you're like, hey, wait a sec. I'm good. This is cool. But my point is if you had let your fear take control of you, you wouldn't have gone. And you may not be sitting here today doing everything you're doing here and moving forward into your dreams and your future. So when you look back on all those moments in life when we are faced with a crossroad of what we're scared about, and well, we've got one, two, however many different paths. If we follow that path of fear, which also is usually the path most walked on, our beautiful, unique, magical, amazing lives may not turn out to be as great as they could be because we're too worried about letting our own fears get in the way.
Yeah, and I think that's super important. Whereas, like, funnily enough, like before I was mentally broken by my injuries, the thing that appealed to me the most about combat sports was walking in there on high alert, fearful
Mm.
that something crazy was going to happen. That is what appealed to me so much. And just like you've probably heard this analogy before, like if someone's lying and you call them out on it, they get angry. So if you go into the gym and you think you're tough and you're getting beat up, you're going to be pretty angry about it internally and really try to push through so you don't get angry about it anymore and you actually meet the mental definition that you have of yourself when it comes to that. And another thing is like, as I've taken on more risks, obviously in different paths since then, I've found a lot more comfort in it. Like, so recently, I started school at NYU in this January, and I went to apply to study abroad. So I'll be going to NYU London in the fall. But this was a huge gamble that I had to make right here. So I came in, I started in January, and in New York City, basically all leases are 12 months. And the way that everything works out with the timing of school is my first semester, my summer semester would be over, and I'd have to leave after 8 months. So I was faced with the dilemma of do I stay on Long Island at home and commute over an hour on the train to get to school every day, which absolutely sucks, especially in January and February when
Mm.
it's 8 degrees Fahrenheit with 3 feet of snow on the ground,
Mm.
may I mind you. So I am not on the hook for $3,000 a month rent for 4 months if I potentially get accepted to the study abroad program. And I remember sitting there, like weighing out the pros and cons in my head. And I said, ultimately, if I back myself to do well in school, I shouldn't be signing the lease because I will get accepted to study abroad. Right. And I said, you know what? Like, there is obviously a huge gap in not competition, but education level. The workload's going up. And also, I'm taking more credits than I've ever taken in my life. I took 18 credits this semester, which is an insane workload. I condensed my classes onto Mondays and Thursdays. So I'm basically sitting in a classroom for like 5 to 7.5 hours a day. So it was a huge gamble, like thinking, okay, like I'm coming out of community college, I'm going to a way higher level education level. And also I'm putting pressure on myself knowingly that I want to study abroad, A, to have better opportunity at Sleeper and be around the Premier League football, which I love so much. And then the other thing is like NYU professors and only NYU students at NYU London. I'm not taking classes through argument's sake, like the City College of London with a bunch of other kids from other institutions in America. So that was really exciting to me. And I have traveled there a couple times for work. And I was like, you know what? Like, I may not live there forever, but I need to have a decent stint in London. And when I took the gamble on myself, A, like knowing I needed good grades to get accepted into the program. B, school's really expensive, so doing well also gets you scholarships, and it's working out for me. And I was really bugging out about that because in the beginning of the year, like when it's 8 degrees and there's 3 feet of snow on the ground and you have a few hours between your classes and you're done eating lunch and you're done doing your homework and you still have to waste time and then you're spending 3 hours on the train every day to get back and forth to get home, like it's heavy on you, but it all paid off because a few months ago I got accepted.
Hey, look, it gets pretty cold over here in London too. Do you think what you've been through then has helped change your mindset?
1000%.
Mm.
Like I said before, in the beginning, the thought of being anxious from the potential of losing something or facing adversity was very much enticing to me when I was in good physical condition. That was not the case when I wasn't in good physical condition because my mental condition dropped off as well. And obviously now, like such a cliche term, like I'm feeling like my old self. It's like, yeah, obviously I'm not riddled with injuries and I'm able to walk around and run and play sports now. And as well, it's like when you're not hesitating, you're confident to go do whatever you want. And when you face the adversity, like you don't really need a plan because ultimately you back yourself to overcome these things and make adjustments on the fly. It's like a plan is great and well and all, but if someone makes an adjustment, just like a fight, like if you go out there and you think you're doing XYZ and the other person comes out with a game plan to counter that, you better have a plan B or C. Like you better be ready. A plan's only good for about 20% of whatever you're planning for.
I think that's a really important point to note too, because we all have plans in life. Whether it's day plans, year plans, week plans, month plans, whatever the plans are. And yeah, focus on the plans. If that's what you want, focus on them. But don't be so blinkered, as in to be like, this is the only way and there's no other way at all, because you miss out on every other opportunity that might come your way that can take you on a different path, even to a different plan. So yeah, it's absolutely important to have a plan, 100% have a plan, but be open to every other opportunity along the way, because you have no idea where that opportunity is going to take you. And also if that opportunity is going to move you forward on that plan anyway.
Yeah, and like I said, sometimes you plan for certain things and you get a lot of enjoyment out of things. Like for instance, when I started class this year, there was one class that I wasn't hopefully one of my professors does not see this on LinkedIn or anything. That would just be a complete shit show, but like fingers crossed. Okay, so there was this one class that when I was signing up for them,
Yeah.
I was not thrilled about taking it, for lack of a better term. And my guidance counselor advised me to take all my core classes towards like my business management degree before I go to NYU London because there's less variety of classes when you go over there. So basically, if I'm left with electives, I could choose whatever I want. Whereas, like, if I had a bunch of business classes left, like, I'm at the mercy of whenever they're scheduled, right? So there's this one class, I'm not going to mention the name of it. I signed up for it because there were no good options. I was like, this is something I'm not interested in. Like, I'm going to be dreading this class. And you know what? Like, I have found like such like a niche interest in this class because the teacher is so passionate about it and makes it exponentially more interesting. And I think that's also very important as well. Like when I said, sometimes a pat on the back goes a long way for different people. If you're coaching a team, like some guys can get carved out by the coach for not back checking or pressing and trying to cause a turnover. And they can be like the donkey in the locker room for the good of the team. And some players literally can't handle that. Some players need to be like, hey, man, I know you're having a bad game. Like, get back to the basics, get back in there. Like, and at the time when I was down from the injuries, I needed that pat on the back. And that's what got me through ultimately.
Mm. We all need a pat on the back sometimes. But I knew you were going to say that. The one thing you didn't want to take was the one thing you ended up enjoying the most. And you know what? I think that sums up quite a lot of life. A lot of the times when we're too regimented in our thinking, our opinions, our ways, what we like, what we don't like, we're not willing to give other things a go. Sometimes we need that little nudge to give said thing a go. And it's amazing how many times we're then like, huh, I kind of like this.
And so much has to do with like the guidance and like the instructor and the tutelage, not even literally just schooling, like coaching, anything, relationships. Like someone can propose a concept to you, and if the person is just rubbing you the wrong way based off their personality and their lack of enthusiasm or attitude, you're not going to be as receptive to it naturally, right? Whereas if someone is like very forthcoming, warm, open, and well educated, and they propose the same exact concept to you, there's an exponentially higher probability that you're going to be receptive to that theory.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree with you. So it makes a lot of sense. And then I want to ask then, just before we do wrap up, what advice would you give to somebody that is going through a very dark place, whether it's, physical injuries or whatnot, but what would you say to somebody that is in that, I don't think it's ever going to change. I'm never going to get where I want to get and my life is not going to get better.
Listen, take it from someone that was stuck in the mud for about 3 years firsthand. When you are rebuilding yourself, you cannot just smear cement over the cracks. You have to rebuild yourself from the foundation up. And like I had mentioned before, whether that is physically or mentally, you cannot leave any stone unturned. If we're talking about sports and there's a certain aspect of your game that's not very good, you increasingly getting better at rainbow flicks is not going to make you a better player. If you have bad cardio and you can't press, get in the gym and run, right? So that's another thing that I say. It's just like you have to push yourself through that stuff. And yeah,
Well, you know what? If you don't push yourself, no one's going to push you. So,
yeah. And one more thing, it's just like another piece of advice that I would give to anyone is like, it does take time. And you can't be intimidated by that because if you rush, like you mentioned before, it can lead to a serious injury. When I came off my knee fracture, led up to a ruptured hamstring just because I was so eager to get back into the gym and do what I wanted. Things take time. And if you're rebuilding yourself from the bottom up, like true foundation wise, and well rounding your skill set or your personal skills in general, it's not going to be a quick thing. And also, there's things you learn about yourself when you're exposed to certain situations that you will have not known, hence why you should probably put yourself into new situations and challenge yourself. Because I had mentioned before, there's a class that I didn't want to take that I ended up loving. And sometimes that is actually what sparks a new motivation inside of you is trying a new thing.
yeah. And you know what? You have to be patient with yourself because every day or every new thing or every new opportunity or fear or risk, whatever it might be, the person that is taking it on or walking into it or in a new situation which they've never handled before, that's a brand new version of yourself. It's a brand new version of yourself dealing with it or going through it, enjoying it, loving it, crying, whatever it might be. So be patient with yourself because you're learning about yourself every single day through everything you go through more and more. And sometimes you'll react the same ways that you've done in the past, and sometimes you won't. And you'll think, this is different today. But you always be patient with yourself because whether that's again wanting something right away and not having it right away, or whether it's recovery, whether it's healing, whether it's jobs, whether it's work, whether it's school, whatever it might be patient with yourself because every day you are a brand new version of you. You are. Every day you wake up, you are a new version of you to take on the world. But just be patient with yourself because you're learning about yourself and it's going to be up, down, up, down, up, down. But that's okay because that's life.
Yeah, and another important thing that I always live by is you sometimes have to reduce your negative reaction time to certain things because obviously it's impossible to not react negatively to things that affect you. So it's like, are you going to let something ruin 15 minutes of your day? Are you going to let something ruin your month? Are you going to let it ruin a week or a day? Sometimes certain things constitute one whole day being ruined, but for the most part, like you should probably be trying to mitigate how much impact that has on your overall day when you are faced with adversity. Obviously, your emotional bandwidth changes every single day based off what you deal with. But yeah, the main goal should be to reduce the time which you're in a funk.
No, and again, I agree. And sometimes we do need to take a day or a few days or a little bit longer to really deal with what we're going through. Sometimes it may be a week or a month, but there comes a point where eventually you've got to get yourself out of it. And whether that's external help, whether that's you're internally doing it, you've got to get yourself out of it eventually.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
So is there anything else you'd like to share today?
No, thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate it so much.
No, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for being here today. Life will knock us down, sometimes hard, and sometimes more than once. And when it feels impossible, know that your story isn't over yet. Sometimes when everything is falling apart, it's really falling into place. You have the power to rise, to heal, to make magic, and to evolve. And you have the power inside you. We all do. You have the power to get back up.